How's it going, everybody? This podcast is brought to you by Rise Make Life Workout, a health, self-development, and lifestyle platform building a passionate community of knowledge seekers, creative dreamers, and future leaders.
For details on the latest Rise event that will feature expert speakers in the field of self-development and growth, check out www.rise-workout.com.
That's www.rise-workout.com. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to another episode of Rise Optimize, where we make science simple to help you optimize your health. And today I'm joined by nutritionist and public health practitioner Amanda Brien.
Thanks for having me, Sinead.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into our topic today, which is all on heart health and how you can eat well to reduce your risk. So tell us a little bit about why that is so important.
So in New Zealand, heart disease is the leading cause of premature death. One New Zealander passes away from heart disease around about every 90 minutes. So it's it's a really big factor, and it used to be thought it was just for males, but actually it's still really prevalent in females as well.
Wow, that is huge, and that's a crazy stat that you just shared. So what are some of the, most common risk factors that would usually put someone in that category?
Well, it can be complicated, and there's risk factors that we would call modifiable, so there's something we can do about it. Eating is one of them, or there's risk factors that unfortunately we can't really do anything about, so things like age, family history, ethnicity, some of those demographics, they're just going to put you more at risk of heart disease. But the important thing to remember with risk factors is it's just a risk. It's not necessarily going to eventuate into an issue. But it's really important to understand what your own personal risk factors are so you can try and do something about it, because there are a whole lot of modifiable risk factors too when it comes to heart health. So food, which is obviously my jam as a nutritionist, but also our movement levels, being smoke-free, blood pressure, cholesterol levels, weight, all of those things play a role in, how at risk you are of developing heart disease.
Yeah, I remember hearing a saying once that genes load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger, in that, like you said, there are those risk factors that you probably can't change in regards to your age or your ethnicity, but so often it's more those modifiable lifestyle ones that are actually going to probably lead us to getting sort of heart issues down the track if we don't sort it out.
And even if I can share my personal experience on my mum's side of the family, it's not very good in terms of those risk factors. My grandfather passed away of heart disease when he was really young. My mum was only in her 20s. Pretty much everyone on that side of the family are on some type of medication to manage cholesterol or blood pressure. And I'd consider them to be really healthy people, but it's just knowing that that's kind of the risk factors. Whenever I've had blood pressure, it's always fine. It's the cholesterol for me. I'm always at that upper end of what's good, and most people will be like, you're a nutritionist, but I'm like, we've all got these things that we can't change. So that's why for me it's important to manage the things I can change, because I know I've got some of those things that I can't change.
And so in regards to eating and food, what would be some of those sort of suggestions in regards to reducing?
So there's there's a lot of things that you can do, but I think, sometimes with health it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I thought it would be good if we just focused in on 3 key nutrients that are more associated with heart disease. So sodium or salt, then saturated fats and fibre.
So what is it about those 3 that are so key in regards to heart?
So with sodium or salt, so too much sodium is related to increased risk of high blood pressure. And if we put all of that extra stress on our blood pressure, that's all our arteries, that's everything. Our circulation system, what our blood flows through, if that's under more pressure, then that just increases the risk of damage and heart disease.
Okay, and saturated fats, is that sort of the same thing?
Yes, so saturated fats, so that is, you might have heard of HDL and LDL, so high density lipoproteins and low density lipoproteins. So they carry cholesterol through our blood. The low density ones deposit on our heart, and our arteries, so they cause that build up. So if you think of your arteries being like a tube, they narrow with that cholesterol building up over time. So if we've got diets that are high in saturated fat, then that translates to increased cholesterol in the blood. So it used to be thought, because foods like eggs, they are high in dietary cholesterol, and it used to be thought that by consuming lots of eggs, lots of dietary cholesterol, that would translate into the increased cholesterol in your heart and your bloodstream. That's not the case. The way the metabolism and all the biochemistry works is it's actually the diets, the foods that are high in saturated fats, that actually translates into the cholesterol. That's just how all the biochemistry works.
Interesting. And I guess last but not least, fibre.
So dietary fibre, so that's kind of the opposite one. So often in nutrition, we're thinking about how we can lower specific nutrients to reduce our risk. So with fibre, it's the opposite. We're wanting to increase our amount of dietary fibre, because I guess it's a little bit of a cleaner for our system. Like, it helps slow down the digestive process. It's really beneficial for our gut. And there's lots of evidence that shows that diets higher in dietary fibre, that can lower the cholesterol risk as well.
And then, so based on those three things that people need to be sort of, I guess, mindful of, what would be the best way, I guess, to be mindful of, like, their sodium intake and their saturated fat intake and fibre intake?
So in terms of sodium, I think it's estimated that 3/4 of our sodium intake comes from processed food. So it's used as a preservative in food. It also tastes good. So, and it helps foods to have a longer shelf life. So a lot of the sodium that we consume is hidden. So just being aware of that. If you're not eating a lot of packaged food, then it might not be something you have to worry about. But, it is really hard in this modern age. A lot of us have to rely on packaged food because we can't make things from scratch. So it is about having a look at food labels, like the Stroke Foundation recommends that products that are less than 120 milligrams per 100, that's considered a low sodium product. Anything that's over 600 milligrams per 100 is a high sodium product, and kind of the ones in between are kind of medium. And like, if you look at things in particular, like sauces and savory snacks, so like your chips and your crackers, even cured meats like salami and all that type of stuff, they can have like sodium levels in the thousands.
Oh wow.
When we're looking at we're trying to aim for less than 120 milligrams. So even if you're like, soy sauce is a good one. You could like turn over the bottle, compare a few different brands and see which one is lower in sodium. So it can take a little bit of work up front, but even thinking of those foods you eat regularly, that's where you can make the biggest difference of choosing a product that's lower in sodium.
Is tamari sauce one of those?
Tamari sauce is kind of like a soy product, so yeah,
But is it slightly like less than soy? That's what I'd heard once upon a time.
I'd have to check the labels. I wouldn't want to make a call like that, because sometimes, like, as a category it might be less, but there might be some within the category that are still really high. So it always does pay to check the label. Yeah.
And is that the same with saturated fat? That's something that would usually be listed on a food label to check the level of that?
Yeah, it is normally listed on a food label. The key things with the saturated fats are typically they come from animal products. So things like butter, dairy products, ghee, they're higher in saturated fats because they're from an animal, generally plant-based oils. So your things like your olive, avocado, canola, things from nuts, seeds and grains, they don't have very much saturated fat at all, but there's always an exception to the rule when it comes to nutrition. And coconut fat and palm oil, well, particularly coconut fat, there's a lot of marketing and hype around that, and there's some people in kind of, health and wellness, fitness industry that kind of swear by that, but the evidence shows the types of fat that are naturally occurring in coconut and palm oil, the way their chemical structures, the way they behave is much more similar to saturated fats than the polyunsaturated fats that come from plant sources. And that's based on like massive epidemiological studies from like over the last 40, 50 years. And they can kind of show trends with our reduction in animal product consumption and a reduction in heart disease.
Oh, well, there you go. And then lastly, fibre. Is that something, again, also usually on a food label?
It's not usually on a food label, because what happens when foods are processed, so like you think about grains, when they're processed, fiber's normally broken down, so you get more fiber from whole grain foods. So often dietary fiber is not even listed on a food label. If it's not, it probably indicates that there's not a lot in there. So yeah, we only get dietary fiber from plant-based foods. So trying to make sure that you have breads and cereals in your diet, but going for the whole grain, whole meal versions over the really refined versions. That's the same for like pasta and rice and noodles. You can often get like a brown version, a whole meal version, and even things like legumes. So beans and legumes, that's your like tinned beans, chickpeas, kidney beans, lentils, all of them, they've got like lots of really good dietary fiber in them as well. And they're not really something that's like commonly consumed in the New Zealand diet, besides good old baked beans.
Well, that's me.
Yeah. But yeah, like there are just so many beans are used throughout the world, and yeah, including more of them in your diet will help to increase the fiber and reduce that risk.
Yeah, epic. They are some great pointers, some great tips that I think people will be able to hopefully be more mindful of when they're next at the shops, and hopefully get some cans of beans.
Yeah, and they're really cheap too. You can even get them dried. It does take a bit more admin. You have to soak them overnight to rehydrate them. With the exception of lentils and split peas, you can just cook them. They're good to go. But yeah, tinned beans are a really great thing just to have in the pantry to whip up or add to a meal as well.
Yeah, awesome. I guess anything else to add on heart health?
So one last thing, the Heart Foundation is a wealth of information. So they have this really cool online tool that you can go in and you can check some of your modifiable risk factors. If you know it, like your blood pressure, cholesterol, weight, that type of stuff, you can enter that in there along with those non-modifiable risk factors like your age and ethnicity, all that type of stuff. And it will work some magic and some maths, and it will tell you what your heart age is, and maybe make some recommendations on some lifestyle changes that you could make. But yeah, if you do have family history of heart disease, it's a really good idea, just, you know, next time you go to your GP, practice nurse, having a conversation with them, particularly as we get a bit older into like, you know, the 40s, then it's time to get a bit more regular screening and checking for things like blood pressure and cholesterol.
That's interesting that you can sort of work out your risk on their website.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Might do that. Awesome. Well, thank you, Amanda, for your time. And if anyone's got any extra questions to hit you up about, where should they find you?
Probably Instagram is best. So it's at amanda.ate. So amanda.8. Yeah, hit me up.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in.